All right, we're in chapter 2.
Chapter 2 of part 2, desire. And we'll get through as much as we can. We've got a bit of an abbreviated schedule today. So
Yeah, we got about 30 minutes.
all right, so let's see what we can get through here. Starting with subsection 1 of chapter 2, desire, the nature of desire. When the monad sends forth his rays into the matter of the third, fourth, and fifth planes, and appropriates to himself an atom of each of these planes, he creates what is often called his reflection in matter, the human spirit. And the will aspect of the monad is mirrored in the human atma, whose home is on the third or atmic plane. That first hypostasis is indeed lessened in powers by the veils of matter thus endued, but it is in no way distorted. As a well-made mirror produces a perfect image of an object, so is the human spirit, Atma Buddhi Manas, a perfect image of the monad. He is indeed the monad himself, veiled in denser matter.
Crazy, we were just talking about that.
I know, right? Well, these books, we know, we've said it many times.
Yeah.
The info comes when we need it. But as a concave or convex mirror yields a distorted image of an object placed before it, so do the further reflections of the spirit in, or involutions into, yet denser matter show but distorted images thereof. Thus, when the will, in its downward progress, veiling itself further on each plane, reaches the world immediately above the physical, the astral world, it appears therein as desire. Desire shows the energy, the concentration, the impelling characteristics of will, but matter has wrenched away its control, its direction from the spirit, and has usurped dominion over it. Desire is will discrowned, the captive, the slave of matter. It is no longer self-determined, but is determined by the attractions around it. This is the distinction between will and desire. The innermost nature of both is the same, for they are verily but one determination, the self-determination of the Atma, the one motor power of man, that which impels to activity, to action on the external world, on the not self. When the self determines the activity, uninfluenced by attractions or repulsions towards surrounding objects, then will is manifested. When outer attractions and repulsions determine the activity, and the man is drawn hither and thither by these, deaf to the voice of the self, unconscious of the inner ruler, then desire is seen. Desire is will clothed in astral matter, in the matter which by the second life wave was formed into combinations, the reaction between which and consciousness would cause sensations in the latter. Clothed in this matter, the vibrations of which are accompanied with sensations and consciousness, will is modified into desire. Its essential nature of giving motor impulses surrounded by matter which arouses sensations, answers by impelling energy, and this energy aroused through and acting through astral matter is desire. As in the higher nature, will is the impelling power, so in the lower nature, desire is the impelling power. When it is feeble, the whole nature is feeble in its reaction on the world. The effective force of a nature is measured by its willpower, or its desire power according to the stage of evolution. There is a truth underlying the popular phrase, the greater the sinner, the greater the saint. The mediocre person can be neither greatly good nor greatly bad. There is not enough of him for more than petty virtues or petty vices. The strength of the desire nature in a man is the measure of his capacity for progress, the measure of the motor energy whereby that man can press onwards along the way. The strength in a man that impels to reaction on his environment is the measure of his power to modify, to change, to conquer it. In the struggle with the desire nature, which marks the higher evolution, the motor energy is not to be destroyed, but transferred. Lower desires are to be transmuted into higher. Energy is to be refined while losing naught of its power. Finally, the desire nature is to vanish into will. All the energy is being gathered up and merged into the will aspect of the spirit, the power of the self. No aspirant, therefore, should be discouraged by the storming and raging of desires in him. any more than a horse breaker is displeased with the rearings and plungings of the unbroken colt. The wildness of the young, untrained creature and his rebellion against all efforts to control and restrain are the promises of his future usefulness when disciplined and trained. And even thus are the strainings of desire against the curb imposed by the intelligence, the promise of the future strength of will, of the power aspect of the self. Rather does difficulty arise when desires are feeble, ere yet the will has freed itself from the trammels of astral matter. For in such case, the will to live is expressing itself but feebly, and there is little effective force available for evolution. There is some obstacle, some barrier in the vehicles checking the forthgoing energy of the monad and obstructing its free passage, and until that barrier is removed, there is little progress to be hoped for. In the storm, the ship drives onward, though there be peril of wreck, but in the dead calm she remains helpless and unmoving, answering neither to sail nor helm. And since in this voyage no final wreck is possible, but only temporary damage, and the storm works for progress rather than the calm, those who find themselves storm-tossed may look forward with sure conviction to the day when the storm gusts of desire will be changed into the steady wind of will. Section 2, the awakening of desire. To the astral world, we refer all our sensations. The centers by which we feel lie in the astral body, and the reactions of these to contacts give rise to feelings of pleasure and pain and consciousness. The ordinary physiologist traces sensation of pleasure and pain from the point of contact to the brain center, recognizing only nervous vibrations between periphery and center, and in the center, the reaction of consciousness as sensation. We follow the vibrations further, finding only vibrations of the brain center and in the ether permeating it, and seeing in the astral center the point at which the reaction of consciousness takes place. When a dislocation between the physical and astral bodies occurs, whether by the action of chloroform, ether, laughing gas, or other drugs, the physical body, despite all its nervous apparatus, feels no more than if bereft of nerves. The links between the physical body and the body of sensation are thrown out of gear, and consciousness does not respond to any stimulus applied. The awakening of desire takes place in this body of sensation. It follows the first dim sensings of pleasure and pain. As before pointed out, pleasure is a sense of moreness, of increased expanded life, while pain is a shutting in or lessening of life, and these belong to the whole consciousness. The primary state of consciousness does not manifest the three well-known aspects of will, wisdom, and activity, even in the most germinal stage. Feeling precedes these, and belongs to consciousness as a whole, though in later stages of evolution it shows itself so much in connection with the will desire aspect as to become almost identified with it. As the states of pleasure and pain become more definitely established in consciousness, they give rise to another. With the fading away of pleasure, there is a continuation of the attraction in consciousness, and this becomes a dim groping after it, a groping, be it noted, not after any pleasure-giving object, but after a continuance of the feeling of pleasure. A vague following of the vanishing feeling, a movement, too indefinite to be called an effort to hold it, to retain it. Similarly, with the fading away of pain, there is a continuation of the repulsion in consciousness, and this becomes an equally vague movement to push it away. These stages give birth to desire. This arising of desire is a feeble reaching out of the life in vague groping. Beyond this, it cannot go until thought has developed to a certain extent and has recognized an outer world, a not-self, and has learned to relate various objects in the not-self to the pleasure or pain arising in consciousness on contacting them. But the results of these contacts, long before the objects are recognized, have caused, as above indicated, a division in, a forking of desire. We may take as one of the simplest illustrations the craving for food in a lowly organism. As the physical body wastes, becomes less, a sense of pain arises in the astral body, a want, a craving, vague and indeterminate. The body, by its wasting, has become a less effective vehicle of the life pouring down through the astral, and this check causes pain. A current in the water that bathes the organism brings food up against the body. It is absorbed, the waste is repaired, the life flows unobstructed. There is pleasure. Excuse me. At a little higher stage, when pain arises, there is the desire to escape from it. The sense of repulsion arises, the contrary to the sense of attraction caused by pleasure. There results from this that desire is cloven in twain. From the will to live arose the longing to experience, and in the lower vehicle, this longing, appearing as desire, becomes on the one hand a longing for experiences that make the feeling of life more vivid, and on the other, a shrinking from all that weakens and depresses. This attraction and repulsion are equally of the nature of desire. Just as the magnet attracts or repels certain metals, so does the embodied self attract and repel. Both attraction and repulsion are desire. And these are the two great motor energies in life, into which all desires are ultimately resolvable. The self comes under the bondage of desire, of attraction-repulsion, and is attracted hither and thither, repelled from this or that, hurried about among pleasure and pain-giving objects, as a helmless ship amid the currents of air and sea. Section 3, the relation of desire to thoughts. We have now to consider the relation that desire bears to thought, and see how it first rules, and then is ruled by the latter. The pure reason is the reflection of the wisdom aspect of the monad, and appears in the human spirit as buddhi. But it is not the relation of desire to the pure reason with which we are concerned, for it cannot, in fact, be said to be directly related to wisdom, but to love, the manifestation of wisdom on the astral plane. We are to seek rather its relation to the activity aspect of the monad, showing itself on the astral plane as sensation and on the mental as thought. Nor are we even concerned with the higher mind, which is creative activity, manas, and its purity, but with the distorted reflection of this, the lower mind. It is this lower mind which is immediately related to desire. And I lost my space. And is inextricably intermingled with it in human evolution. So closely joined indeed are they, that we often speak of kama manas, desire mind, as of a single thing. So rare is it in the lower consciousness to find a single thought which is uninfluenced by a desire. Manas verily is declared to be twofold, pure and impure. The impure is determined by desire, the pure is desire-free. This lower mind is thought on the mental plane. Its characteristic property is that it asserts and denies. It knows by difference, it perceives and remembers. On the astral plane, as we have seen, the same aspect that on the mental plane is thought appears as sensation and is aroused by contact with the external world. When a pleasure has been experienced and has passed away, desire arises to experience it again, as we have seen. And this fact implies memory, which is a function of the mind. Here, as ever, are we reminded that consciousness is ever acting in its threefold nature. Through one or other aspect may predominate, for even the most germinal desire cannot arise without memory being present. The sensation caused by an external impact must have been many times aroused before the mind will establish a relation between the sensation of which it is conscious and the external object which has caused the sensation. At last, the mind perceives the object, i.e., relates it to one of its own changes, recognizes a modification in itself caused by the external object. Repetitions of this perception will establish a definite link in memory between the object and the pleasurable or painful sensation, and when desire presses for the repetition of pleasure, the mind recalls the object which supplied that pleasure. Thus, the mingling of thought with desire gives birth to a particular desire, the desire to find and appropriate the pleasure-giving object. This desire impels the mind to exert its inherent activity, discomfort being caused by the unsatisfied craving. Effort is made to escape the discomfort by supplying the object wanted. The mind plans, schemes, drives the body into action in order to satisfy the cravings of desire. And similarly, equally prompted by desire, the mind plans, schemes, drives the body into action in order to avoid the recurrence of pain from an object recognized as pain-giving. Such is the relation of desire to thought. It rouses, stimulates, urges on mental efforts. The mind is, in its early stages, the slave of desire, and the rapidity of its growth and its proportion to the fierce urgings of desire. We desire and thus are forced to think. How are we doing on time?
Yeah, let's keep going.
Keep going? Okay, section 4, desire, thought, action. The third stage of the contact of the self with the not self is action. The mind, having perceived the object of desire, leads to, guides, and shapes the action. Action is often said to arise from desire, but desire alone could only arouse movement or chaotic action. The force of desire is, not sure what that word is there. Repulsive, not directive. Thought it is that adds the element of direction and shapes the action purposively. This is the ever-recurring cycle of consciousness: desire, thought, action. The propulsive power of desire arouses thought. The directive power of thought guides action. This sequence is invariable, and the clear understanding thereof is of the profoundest importance, for the effective control and conduct depends on this understanding and on its application and practice. The shaping of karma can only be achieved when the sequence is understood, for evitable and inevitable action can only thus be discriminated. It is by thought that we can change desire and thereby change action. When the mind sees that certain desires have impelled to thoughts that have directed actions, which were productive of unhappiness, it can resist the future promptings of desire in a similar direction and refuse to guide actions to a result already known as disastrous. It can picture the painful results and thus arouse the repellent energy of desire. It can imagine the blissful outcome of desires of the opposite kind. The creative activity of thought can be exerted in the molding of desire, and its propulsive energy can be turned into a better direction. In this way, thought can be used to master desire, and it may become the ruler instead of the slave. And as it thus asserts control over its unruly companion, it begins the transmutation of desire into will, changing the governance of the outgoing energy from the outer to the inner, from the external objects that attract or repel to the spirit, the inner ruler.
Yeah, let's finish this chapter up.
Okay, section 5, the binding nature of desire. Since the will to live is the cause of the forthgoing, of the life-seeking embodiment and appropriating to itself that which is necessary for its manifestation, and persistence in form, desire, being will on a lower plane, shows similar characteristics, seeking to appropriate, to draw into itself, to make part of itself that whereby its life and form may be maintained and strengthened. When we desire an object, we seek to make it part of ourselves, part of the I, so that it may form part of the embodiment of the I. Desire is the putting forth the power of attraction. It draws the desire object to itself. Whatever we desire, we attach to ourselves. By the desire to possess it, a bond is established between the object and the desirer. We tie to the self this portion of the not self, and the bond exists until the object is possessed, or until the self has broken off the bond and repudiated the object. These are the bonds of the heart. Tie the self to the wheel of births and deaths.
That is so profound.
These bonds between the desirer and the object of desire are like ropes that draw the self to the place where the objects of desire are found, and thus determine its birth into one or another world. On this runs the verse, he also who attached ever obtains by action that on which his mind has set its mark. Having obtained the object of action, he here performs. He comes again thereof, therefore, from that world to this world for the sake of action. Thus it is with the desiring mind. If a man desires the objects of another world more than the objects of this, then into that world will he be born. There is a continuing tension in the bond of desire until the self and the object are united. The one great determining energy, the will to live, which holds the planets in their path around the sun, which prevents the matter of the globes from scattering, which holds our own bodies together, that is the desire, that is the energy of desire. That which rules all is in us as desire, and it must draw to us, or draw us to, everything into which it has fixed its hooks. The hook of desire fixes itself in an object, as a harpoon in the well at which it is flung by the harpooner. When desire has fixed its harpoon in an object, the self is attached to that object, has appropriated it in will, and presently must appropriate it in action. Hence a great teacher has said, if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. If thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee. The thing desired becomes part of the body of the self, and if it be evil, it should be torn out at whatever cost of anguish. Otherwise, it will only be worn away by the slow attrition of time and of weariness. Only the strong can kill it out. The weak must wait for its growth, its fruition, its death. Section 6. The breaking of the bonds. For the breaking of the bonds of desire, recourse he had to the mind. Therein lies the power which shall first purify and then transmute desire. The mind records the results which follow the appropriation of each object of desire, and marks whether happiness or pain has resulted from the union of that object with the embodied self. And when, after many appropriations of an attractive object, it has found the result to be pain, it registers that object as one which should be avoided in the future. The delights that are contact born, they are verily wombs of pain. Then arises strife. When that attractive object again presents itself, desire throws out its harpoon and seizes it and begins to draw it in. The mind, remembering the painful result of previous similar captures, endeavors to check desire, to cut with the sword of knowledge the attaching bond. Fierce conflict rages within the man. He is dragged forward by desire, held back by thought. Oops. Many and many a time desire will triumph and the object will be appropriated, but the resulting pain is ever repeated, and each success of desire arrays against it another enemy in the forces of the mind. Inevitably, however, slowly, thought proves stronger until at last victory inclines to its side, and a day comes when the desire is weaker than the mind, and the attractive object is loosed. The attaching cord is cut. That object, the bond is broken. In this conflict, thought seeks to utilize against desire the strength of desire. It selects objects of desire that give a relatively lasting happiness and seeks to utilize these against the desires that swiftly result in pain. Thus, it will set artistic against sensual pleasure. It will use fame and political or social power against enjoyments of the flesh. It will stimulate the desire to please the good, to strengthen abstention from, what is that? Delicious delights. It will finally make the desire for eternal peace conquer the desires for temporal joys. By the one
by the one great attraction,
the lower attractions are slain and cease
to be any
to
longer
be any longer the
objects
objects of desire. Even taste for them
turneth
away from him after the supreme is seen.
the very energy of desire can tear it away from that which brings pain and fix it on that which brings bliss. The same force that bound is made to serve as an instrument of freedom, wrenching itself away from objects. It will turn upwards and inwards, attaching the man to the life whence he came forth, and in union with which consists his highest bliss.
Okay. Herein lies the value of devotion as a liberator. Love,
Turning
turning to the supreme, sees him as eminently desirable, as an object for intense desire, and this burns up attachments to objects that keep the heart in bondage. Only by the self as thought can be mastered the self as desire. Self, realizing itself as the life, overcomes the self embodied and thinking itself to be the form. The man must learn to separate himself from the vehicles in which he desires, thinks, and acts, to know them as part of the not self, as material external to life. Thus, the energy that went out to objects in the lower desires becomes the higher desire, guided by the mind, and is prepared to be transmuted into will. As the lower mind emerges itself in the higher, and the higher into that which is wisdom, the aspect of pure will emerges as the power of the spirit, self-determined, self-ruled, in perfect harmony with the supreme will, and therefore free. Then only are all bonds broken, and the spirit is unconstrained by aught outside himself. Then, and then only, can the will be said to be free. And that concludes chapter 2.
Man,
Sounds like a lot of stuff we talked about before we came on video.
like it sounds like it sounds exactly like our conversation.
Yeah,
You know,
funny how that works out.
that's crazy.
Crazy and wonderful.
All right, buddy. Well, that was
We
pretty
got through it.
awesome. We finished
Yeah.
the full chapter there, and we'll hit it up again. We'll keep it going.
Sounds good.
So, all right. Well, I guess I'll shut it here, and then we'll see you next week.
Sounds good.